Hello, my name's Stephen from K-Scale Models, and today I'm doing a talk about how to make instructions for your 3D printed models. So, this will go over how you make it as well as the theories behind it and what is good practices and why. So, this will be quite lengthy. So, first thing, this is the Tragos that I'm using for my video today. I'll be using this mainly. There's a couple other models I'll be using, but yeah. When I was designing this model, from the ground up, I knew it had to be assembled and intentionally broke parts off to be assembled separately. Most of these were being split off so they could be painted separately because this is designed to be painted. It's trying to keep color separation. But keep this in mind when you're making a 3D model is it will have to be assembled in some form and break off parts that will make it easier to assemble. So, the first thing to note is the numbering system I'm using. Alphanumerical. So, there is a reason for this. If you name a part, say A1 and A2 and A3, A4, etc., that links them together. So straight away, someone that's coming into this and sees a part A1 to A10 or A11 in this case, they'll know that they are all connected. In this case, they're all connected to the main hull or the torso section. So going down, I've got B section. So all the B models are relating to the right hand. All the C models are relating to their left hand. So that makes it easier for people to understand that this is what things are. And I always make the last possible numbering system or lettering system the weapons, because weapons are normally assembled last and put on the model depending on what the person actually wants in their model. So yeah, that is why I'm using the number system. There is other reasons for it. Alphanumerical number systems like this generally translate better than, say, what I was doing in the past. So this is what I was doing before. I was actually going in and naming things. Now, in a small model like this, the Jernchong, yeah, I could kind of get away with it, but at the same time, I didn't because, well, things are spelt wrong. So, yeah, and then when everything is moved over to the other side, it automatically puts a 1 next to it because there's already that part. So, yeah, numbering a system like this, it's poor. It doesn't work, and whilst it tells people what they're looking at, let's just take an example. I've put this to MG. So that is from here on called MG. Problem is, translate that into another language. Machine gun does not always mean, MG is not always machine gun. It could be a whole bunch of other things. It could be a car manufacturer for all they know. So yeah, do not just call things by a descriptive name. It will not get you anywhere. It will cause confusion. So yeah, alphanumeric system I've found to be the best way of doing things. So I've, as I said, not always done it, but it's the best way I've found. I'm still learning, so there will still be things in the future I'll learn that actually mean do it this way instead. So that is just the basics of like what you do with the model. Now we've got to get the model from the 3D space into a 2D space. So, or at least that would be the plan, because we do not want the person that's having to build this instruction to have a tablet with them. We don't want them to have a computer with them. We want this to be fairly easy for them to understand. And the easiest way to do this in a way that is transportable is to let them be able to print it out. So we want to be able to actually make this into an A4 bit of paper. So in Fusion 360, I go to Design, Drawing, from Design, and then what I do here is I always make this A4. So why do I do this? Well, I'm assuming that most people will be printing this out in A4 or will be looking at an A4. And when I'm printing it out, I've got an A4 printer. I've not got an A3 printer. So this is what I'll be doing. I'll be making it out in A4. So automatically, Fusion 360 tells you to place the base view. So that's what it's doing here. Now, first thing I'm going to be doing is not actually the instructions themselves. It is the parts list. So, a couple of things with a parts list. One, objects should be facing you in the most recognizable part. So, in this case, I'm going to be doing A1, so that's the torso. So that's going to be just straight on, and it's 1-to-1 scale. The reason it's 1-to-1 scale is because when someone is trying to find a part and work out what part have they actually got here, they're going to be using what they've got in their hand, and they're going to be placing it next to the part and going, does that match? If yes, we've got a winner here. If no, we've not, and it's going to cause problems. So, yeah, that is why we do it that way. Now, actually, before I start messing around with a model, I've got to get rid of all this. So this is the drawing sheet. If you're a kind of draftsman, a drawing sheet is kind of telling the person that's picking it up all the information about it. And this is the thing. I'm coming from a draftsman background, so I'm used to having to give a bit of paper to someone on the shop floor to weld something up. Now, this person is an expert in their field. They're a professional. So I give them a bit of paper telling them to make this. They'll know that, all right, yeah, they're to cut it here and weld it here. But we have to be working to the lowest denominator. This could very well be the first kit that someone actually makes. So bear that in mind when you're making it, is that you're making this for the person that comes in who has never made a model kit before, doesn't know how it all works, and you need to give them clear, concise instructions so they can make this. So anyway, back to the model itself. So I'm wanting A1 as the part, so I would highlight A2, and I'm going to highlight down to B12. In this particular case, right click, show hide. So this basically hides all the parts that were selected there, and I'm going to do it down from B13 onwards. Now, the reason I've had to split it in two in this case is because I've got a part that wasn't used. This was an attempt to make the arm. It didn't work, so because I used some of the dimensions from it and used that for other parts, I had to keep that part, because if I got rid of it, it would break the model. So that's why it's still there. It's just a holdover. So anyway, the next thing I do is I label this A1. So I don't normally need to do this straight away, but I'd line it up in a relative spot where you would go, okay, this is A1. Now, we're going to do the same for two more bits. So doing front view, and this is where things can go a bit skewy. So this is going to be part 2. Now, you'll notice here when I place the base view, and that's what I'm doing up here, I'm placing base view. You can do project, section, all sorts of bits. Play around with this. It will become useful, and you will find times that you actually go in and use these when you're doing these instructions. But anyway, you'll notice that not in use is now actually there. So yeah, that means that I can basically just go from A3 all the way down to the bottom, select, and then I get my part. Now, we can see here, this is A2. A2 is not flat. A2 actually lives in there. So yeah, this is not ideal. To be honest, this is one of the things I haven't worked out a good way around yet, but we can still demonstrate what it is. So, doing A2 here. Now, again, we just move that in place, make sure it's obvious what we're looking at. So, the next one I'm doing is A3. So, this is probably one of the more important parts to get when we're doing this, just because of the way it's all made. So again, I'm just clicking these little hide icons. That little eyeball is visual, basically. Is it viewed? So anyway, do that, and there. So that is A3. So I'll just copy this over. So I'm just using Control C, Control V to do that. So there. So I'm going to do the last one, and this will demonstrate why I say number everything and do it in this sort of order. So there. So this is A4, and you notice it looks a lot like A3, doesn't it? It's just a mirror. And in fact, this is keyed to be this way around, so you shouldn't be able to put this in the wrong way around. And that's another thing when you're making kit. Try to key objects that are left and right handed so they will not fit in the other handed. If you get that wrong, then someone's going to put in a model the wrong way around, and we're going to be not able to actually work on it. So anyway, yeah, this is important because these are very similar parts. Now, you could, if you get parts that are identical, go and just call them the same thing and just say two of. That is acceptable. However, I like to be methodical in this one, and I like to make sure that every single part has its own name, because it just becomes a bit of a nightmare if you've got A3 and A32, and basically it just makes it easier sometimes to name them, especially if they might have slight variations like this one does, and that way people know what they're looking at. As I said, it is perfectly legitimate to name two identical objects the exact same thing, and just when you're doing the sheet, you just say, for instance, I would put in, or just say it was A4 that was two of. So you would do X2. So this is generally considered to be there is two of this. So yeah, in engineering, what we'd normally do is 2 dash. This is what we do, but for household use, it's normally that X2 or X3 or X4, because people understand, right, that means times that. So yeah, so that's how you do a parts list. So that's that bit. Of course, you would name this part list. You'd actually have a big heading here saying part. Oh, I just messed that up. Okay, but anyway, you get the idea. You have a big label here saying parts list, and if in this case, I'll probably have to go into parts list 3. So next thing, let's make another sheet. Now, just as a quick check, this sheet is yep, A4 again. So you can see here what format the sheet is in. Now, we want to pull through the model again. So we just go to base view. I'm going to do 1:2 scale because this is a fairly large object. So when you're doing the actual instruction side, which is what we're doing now, try to keep all the instructions the same scale. You will sometimes find that you have to enlarge the scale, and when you do, try to make it clear that you have enlarged the scale. Likewise for this. Sometimes you'll get objects that are so small that when someone prints it out, it's not going to be actually visible, or it's going to be just a blob. So yeah, in that case, zoom in or increase the scale, and that'll help. But it's kind of try to avoid it where you can. Understand where a rule, or why you do a rule, so you can break it later. So yeah. Anyway, moving on to this. So again, I'm just going to go in and remove a couple of bits. Oh, no. You there to there. Show hide. And I'm going to do... And, oh, I forgot to do something. So if I double click, I can get back in and I can change the orientation of it. So, yeah, you can see here, this thing is tiny. So, anyway. Next one. 2. yeah, so you can see here this takes a little while, but it's kind of the necessary evil of this. So anyway, I'm misclicking. Ah, there. So yeah, I was hitting control rather than shift. If you hit control, you only select one. You hit shift, you hit multiple. Okay, so this is where things start to get a bit confusing. And this is why I'm doing these particular parts. So, dun dun dun. Oh, yeah, I'm using the mouse wheel to scroll up and down these. So, this is one of these games, isn't it? Which one's which? Well, I can tell this one is A4. So, if I remember, A3 goes this side, A4 goes this side. Now, that's just from memory. Let's double check. So, A4. A3. Okay, so now we know that that's that. So let's just go double check this. So, yes, A3 is that side of the model. So we now know that we've got this the right way around. So that's important because, as I said, these bits are pretty identical. And if you've got a left hand, right hand option, someone will put it in the wrong one. So yeah, that's a little tip to mark down particular parts if they are going to be confusing. Most of them you should remember off the top of your head, or if you don't, again, just mark them. It costs you 2 seconds of a little check, so I will save you a lot of time later down the line. So the final thing I'm putting in is a kind of, this is what the final result is when you put all this in. Now, I'm not going to be making the instruction in Fusion 360. I'm going to be making it in Inkscape. The reason is that I find Inkscape works better for these. So, I can export as a whole variety of things, but I just export as a PDF. Now, I'm going to take off line width because I was having problems with this earlier, where this disappeared into a blob, because you can see here it's quite thin on the lines. So, yeah, what I'd have to do in this particular one probably is mess around with the line width and make them really thin, because if not, then this is just going to disappear into a blob because of its size. So anyway, part 1, override. So then open part 1. So just a bit of file management. When you're making instructions, put them into their own folder. I've got, in this case, references, so this is all my reference material. These are all the snips I've taken during the course of making them. I could put them into their own folder. I've got a file for STLs. These are just the test ones, so they're not the finals. And then I've got the instructions. Now, when you're actually saving the instructions as something, like when you're getting them out of Fusion 360 or whatever program you're using, make sure you call them something that is not going to be mistaken for your particular your actual instructions. So in this case, I've called them part 1. I've just realized I've probably done something wrong with this. So let's see if I have. So I'm going to open them. And yes, I have. So Inkscape, when you open up a PDF, will open up the first page. And that's the parts list. I don't want the parts list for this. So go back here, export as PDF, current, get rid of the line width for the moment. I'm testing something. Override part 1. And then back into Inkscape, open part 1. Now, we've got all the parts in, and one of the things I like doing is you can move them around as their own object. Now, if you decide to be smart and you've got 2 objects that are going to be fitting into the same spot and they're close enough together, you can just make them as one part when you're like doing the whole like bit here where you're getting them into individual parts. In that case, Inkscape will see them as one part as well. So if you do it this way, you get the parts, you can maneuver them around. Sometimes that's easier to work with. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be drawing a couple of lines from this. So these tell the person that's making this kit what they're actually to assemble, like where things are to be assembled. Now, you can see there's an obvious problem here. This part has to go in this way. It goes in from the top, so you would show the line coming from the top down, and you've got this part coming in from the side. These lines cross over. That creates problems. You do not. It might be a case that people go, oh, it goes in like that and that. Now, you and I might go, oh, no one would actually think that. But if there's any possibility of someone doing something wrong because of your instructions, redo the instructions. Take an extra page, do whatever you have to, but do not cross the lines where you can. I'm doing this for demonstration purposes, for quickness, but I'm explaining where things are going wrong here and why it's bad. So, yeah. So anyway, moving on, we've got A3 and A4. So, just plug them in. Now, next thing I need to do is I need to go and call things stuff. So, A1. Now, don't know why, but my text always seems to go upside down in this version. I don't know what's going on, but oh well. Now, pick a bunch of these around. So, first thing I would do is basically match them up. So, that to there, that to there, that to there, and that to there. So, I know this is A2, I know this is A3, and I know this is no, I got that wrong. This is A3, this is A4. So, now I can go in and delete A3 and A4 there because they're different size and different fonts. So, you're trying to keep them all the same size and font, keep things consistent. Then, I'm going to take this one and put it up here and draw a box around the whole thing. So, what does this tell someone that's coming in to build your kit? That this is part 1. This is part 1 of page 1, and they know what they're doing. So, next, where possible, I would say try to give a finished result. So that's what this is. This is basically us saying, okay, if you've assembled this all correct, this is now what it looks like. So, yeah. Now, this would be 2, and then this would be 1. So, this is again why you would use an alphanumeric system rather than just a number system. Because when you're making the instructions, each section is called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each part is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of thing. So, if we need to insert a body or insert a part from part 1, we can say this is part 1 on section 2, and we can have another body that's here. Oh, just copy this over. Copy that over. So we've got another component here called A5. And A5 goes in here sort of thing. So you've got, now people can clearly see that's this. And then this part is separate. That is, one is a component, A is a part. So it makes it easy for people to understand where you're coming from and what you're doing. So, yeah. That is the basics of how to make an instruction for your model kit. This works for basically everything. You'll see that this is very similar to the IKEA style of instruction, and this is the thing. IKEA, we can moan about them, furniture not fitting together, etc., and all sorts of other things, but their instructions are really well laid out and are very clear, and this is the sort of thing you're going for. You're going for that level where anything that you put down on paper, someone else can pick up and know exactly what you're doing, and you do not need to use words to describe it. So that is what you're trying, that's your aim, and that hopefully gives you an idea of how you would do it. Hopefully this has helped, and if you've got any other suggestions for videos, please leave them in the comments below. I will be looking for more content later on. Thank you for watching.